The moment, Willa Garrett saw the trader's eyes flicker over her stack of beaver pelts. She knew he was calculating how much he could cheat her. She had spent 3 brutal months in the Montana Territory wilderness, trapping alongside her late father, before fever took him. And these furs represented everything she had left in the world besides her rifle and the clothes on her back. $10 for the lot, the trader said, not even bothering to examine the quality of the pelts spread across his wooden counter. His store in Fort Benton smelled of tobacco and greed, and Willa's stomach turned as she recognized the contempt in his dismissive wave. $10. Her voice came out sharper than intended. These are prime beaver winter coat, no damage. That pile is worth at least $200. The trader, a thin man named Samuel Potts with greasy hair and yellow teeth, laughed outright. Little girl, I don't know what your daddy told you, but furs aren't worth what they used to be. $10 is generous. Take it or leave it. Willa's hands balled into fists at her sides. She was 22 years old, not a little girl, and she knew the value of good fur. Her father had taught her everything about trapping, and she had watched enough transactions to know what fair prices looked like. But she also knew that, as a woman alone in Fort Benton in the summer of 1874, her options were severely limited. Without money, she could not buy supplies, could not eat, could not survive. I will leave it, she said, though her heart hammered with fear at her own boldness. I will find someone honest to trade with. Good luck with that, sweetheart, Potts called after her as she began gathering her furs. I am the only trader in 200 miles who will even talk to a woman. Willa was struggling to bundle the heavy pelts when the door to the trading post opened, letting in a shaft of bright Montana sunlight and a man who had to duck to clear the door frame. She looked up and felt her breath catch despite herself. He was enormous, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to fill the narrow aisle between shelves. Long, dark hair fell past his collar, and several days' worth of beard shadowed a strong jaw. But it was his eyes that held her attention, a piercing blue that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore buckskin trousers and a worn cotton shirt that stretched across a chest and arms corded with muscle, the kind of strength that came from years of hard living in the wilderness. Finn Irwin, Potts said, his tone immediately shifting to something more respectful. Did not expect to see you down from the mountains until fall. The mountain man did not respond immediately. His eyes had moved to Willa, still clutching her bundle of furs, then to the trader. Something in his expression hardened. Having trouble with your prices again, Potts? His voice was deep, with a rough edge that spoke of long silences and infrequent conversation. No trouble at all, just explaining market realities to the young lady. Finn Irwin moved closer, and Willa caught the scent of pine and leather and something wild. He reached out slowly, giving her time to object, and touched one of the beaver pelts. His hands were huge, scarred, and surprisingly gentle as he examined the fur. These are exceptional quality, he said, not looking at Potts. Winter beaver, prime condition, expert skinning and curing, worth at least $200, maybe $250 to the right buyer. He finally turned his gaze to the trader, and there was steel in it. You trying to cheat this woman? Potts's face reddened. Now see here, Irwin, this is my establishment and I set my own prices. And I do my trading in Helena, Finn said mildly, where I will be happy to tell every trader and trapper I meet about Samuel Potts and his business practices. How long do you think you will last when word spreads that you swindle women? The threat hung in the air. Willa watched the trader's face cycle through anger, calculation, and finally resignation. A man like Finn Irwin, who clearly commanded respect among the mountain men and trappers, could indeed ruin Potts's reputation with a few well-placed words. Fine, Potts spat. $100. 200, Finn countered, his voice never rising but carrying absolute authority. And you will throw in 20 pounds of flour, 10 pounds of salt, and a new skinning knife. I saw you admiring that blade on your shelf, miss, he added to Willa. The one with the bone handle. Willa could only nod, too stunned to speak. She had noticed that knife, beautiful and sharp and far beyond her means. Potts looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Finn's stance, the easy way he carried his considerable size and strength, discouraged objection. Done, he muttered, and began counting out bills from his cash box with obvious reluctance. As the trader gathered the supplies, Finn helped Willa stack her furs on the counter. Up close, she could see the details she had missed before. A scar running along his left forearm, the calluses on his hands, the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt as he worked. He was perhaps 28 or 30, she guessed, with the weathered look of someone who spent most of his life outdoors. Thank you, she managed, finding her voice. I do not know what I would have done. He glanced at her, and something softened in those intense blue eyes. What is your name? Willa Garrett. You trapped those yourself, Willa Garrett, my father and I together. He died 3 weeks ago, fever. The words still hurt to say, the wound too fresh. Finn's expression shifted to something that might have been sympathy. I am sorry. Takes skill to cure pelts that well. He taught you good. Potts slammed the supplies onto the counter along with the money, breaking the moment. There, we are done. Finn counted the bills carefully before handing them to Willa. You should recount it yourself. Never trust a man who tried to cheat you once. She did, her hands trembling slightly, and found the full $200. More money than she had ever held at one time. Enough to survive, maybe even enough to start over somewhere. Now then, Finn said, turning back to Potts. I am going to buy those supplies back from Miss Garrett for full price, along with half the pelts. Consider it an investment. Willa's head snapped up. What? No, you already helped me. I cannot. Not charity, Finn interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. Business. I was planning to do some trapping up near the Teton River this season, but it is a big territory for one man. You know how to trap and cure pelts like these. You would be an asset. We split everything 50-50. You keep your supplies and money from these furs. We trap together, bring back what we get, and divide the profits fair. She stared at him, trying to understand the offer. You want me to trap with you, if you are willing. I have a cabin about 40 miles north of here, good territory. We can work separate trap lines during the day, share the work of camp and curing at night. Safer than being alone, more profitable than working solo. But it is your choice. Willa's mind raced. Everything about this was improper, dangerous even. She did not know this man, and going into the wilderness alone with him was exactly the kind of thing that ruined reputations and got women killed. But the alternative was staying in Fort Benton with rapidly dwindling funds and no prospects, or trying to trap alone in the mountains, which was its own kind of death sentence. She looked at Finn Irwin again, really looked at him. There was something solid about him, something that felt trustworthy despite the impossibility of the situation. He had just negotiated a fair price for her when he had no reason to get involved. He could have walked past, minded his own business, let Potts cheat her. Instead, he had stood up for her, and now he was offering her a chance to survive. 50-50 split, she asked. On everything. Everything. Pelts, meat, whatever we get, partners. What about the cabin, living arrangements? Cabin has 2 rooms. You get one, I get the other. Your space is yours. Any man who cannot control himself in the wilderness is not much of a man in my book. The bluntness of the statement, the casual way he dismissed the impropriety that would scandalize any proper society, made up her mind. Proper society had never done much for her anyway. "All right," she said. "Partners." Finn held out his hand and she shook it. His grip was warm and strong, engulfing her smaller hand completely, but he was careful not to squeeze too hard. Potts watched the exchange with obvious disapproval. "You are making a mistake, Irwin. Taking a woman into the mountains." "Then it is my mistake to make," Finn said without looking at him. "Come on, Miss Garrett. We have supplies to buy and a long ride ahead." They left the trading post together, and Willa felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope yet, but the beginning of it. Maybe even something more, though she did not let herself examine that thought too closely. Finn's horse was tied outside, a massive chestnut gelding that suited its owner's size. "You have a mount?" he asked. "Had to sell it last week for food money," Willa admitted, hating how it exposed her desperation. He nodded, taking it in stride. "We will get you one. There is a rancher at the edge of town who owes me a favor." As they walked through Fort Benton, Willa was acutely aware of the stares they attracted. A proper young woman did not walk through town with a mountain man, did not make business arrangements without a male relative's permission, did not do half the things she had done in the past hour. But her father had raised her to be practical above all else, and practicality meant survival trumped propriety every time. The rancher, a weathered man named Tom who looked to be in his 50s, brightened when he saw Finn. "Heard you were in town. Got that breeding advice you gave me last fall. Best calf crop I have had in years." "Glad it worked out," Finn said. "I am calling in that favor now. My partner here needs a good horse, something steady, used to rough country." Tom's eyebrows rose at the word partner, but he was smart enough not to comment. He showed them to a corral where several horses grazed. "Got a mare might suit. 6 years old, sure-footed, does not spook easy. Used to belong to my daughter before she got married and moved to Oregon." The mare was a stocky bay with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. Willa approached slowly, letting the horse catch her scent, then ran her hands over the animal's legs and back, checking for soundness. Her father had taught her to evaluate horses just as he had taught her everything else about frontier survival. "She is good," Willa said. "Strong build, good feet." "What are you asking for Finn's partner? Call it even for the breeding advice." Finn shook his head. "That is too generous, Tom. Add a saddle and tack and we will call it square." They shook on it, and within an hour, Willa found herself mounted on the bay mare, which she immediately named Josie after her grandmother. Finn had also purchased additional supplies from a general store, packing them efficiently onto his horse, and a mule he kept stabled at the edge of town. "Ready?" he asked, swinging into his saddle with easy grace despite his size. Willa looked back at Fort Benton one last time. She had arrived that morning alone, desperate and nearly destitute. She was leaving with a horse, supplies, money, and a business partner who was either the answer to her prayers or the biggest mistake of her life. "Ready," she said, and they rode north into the Montana wilderness. The journey to Finn's cabin took 2 days of steady riding through some of the most beautiful and unforgiving country Willa had ever seen. They followed the Missouri River for a stretch, then cut northwest into rolling hills that gradually gave way to mountains. The landscape was vast and empty, with only the occasional sign of human presence: a weathered wagon trail, a long abandoned campsite, the distant smoke of a homestead fire. Finn set a pace that was steady but not punishing, clearly conscious of the fact that Willa had not been on a horse in over a week. They stopped frequently to rest the animals and refill their canteens from clear mountain streams. He did not talk much, but his silence felt companionable rather than hostile, and when he did speak, it was to point out landmarks or share information about the territory. "That mountain there, The one that looks like a broken tooth, that is where the Teton River starts. Our trap lines will run mostly east of there, down through the valleys. Good beaver country, some mink and otter too if we are lucky. Willa listened and observed, noting how Finn moved through the wilderness with the confidence of someone completely at home. He read the landscape the way she read books, seeing stories in broken branches and disturbed earth that spoke of animal movements and weather patterns. They made camp the first night in a sheltered hollow, beside a creek. Finn built a fire with practiced efficiency while Willa tended to the horses, rubbing them down and making sure they were securely hobbled with good grazing nearby. When she returned to the fire, Finn had already set up 2 bedrolls on opposite sides of the flames and was preparing coffee and bacon in a battered pan. "You do not have to do all the cooking," Willa said, sitting cross-legged on her bedroll. "We are partners. I can take my share of camp chores." "Fair enough. You make breakfast tomorrow, then." They ate in comfortable silence, and as darkness fell and stars emerged overhead in a brilliant display impossible to see in any town, Willa felt some of the tension she had been carrying begin to ease. Out here, away from Fort Benton and its judgmental eyes, things felt simpler. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. Finn looked up from poking at the fire. "Go ahead." "Why did you help me? You do not know me. You could have just done your business and left." He was quiet for a moment, considering. Knew a woman once who got cheated by a trader. She had been traveling with her husband, but he died crossing a river. The trader told her the same things Potts told you, that furs were not worth much, that she should be grateful for whatever he offered. She believed him because she did not know any different. Traded a whole season's worth of prime pelts for barely enough to survive a month. What happened to her? Starved to death that winter. I found her body in a lean-to about 50 miles from the trading post. She had written a letter to her sister back east, never got to send it. That was 7 years ago, and I still think about it sometimes. Think about how if someone had just stood up and told that trader he was a cheat, she might have lived. The story settled between them, heavy and sad. Willa understood now, understood the look she had seen in Finn's eyes when he watched Potts trying to swindle her. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "Not your fault. But when I saw that trader pulling the same game today, I figured I could stop it this time." He met her eyes across the fire. "As for the partnership offer, that is just good sense. Trapping alone is hard work and dangerous. 2 people can cover more ground, watch each other's backs, and you clearly know what you are doing with those pelts. That was expert work. My father was a good teacher. Must have been." "What brought you 2 out to Montana?" Willa wrapped her arms around her knees, staring into the flames. "My mother died when I was 16. After that, my father got restless. He had always wanted to see the frontier, so we sold our farm in Illinois and headed west. We tried our hand at different things, panning for gold, buffalo hunting, freight hauling. He taught me everything along the way. The trapping was the first thing that really worked for us. We had just started to make good money when he got sick. What will you do after this season?" "Assuming we do well." It was a question she had been avoiding thinking about. "I do not know. Keep trapping, I suppose. It is the only trade I have now." Finn nodded slowly. "Well, if you want to make it a longer partnership, I would be willing. Always room for a good trapper in this territory." The offer warmed her more than the fire did. "I would like that." They settled into their bedrolls soon after, the fire burning low between them. As Willa lay looking up at the stars, listening to the night sounds of the wilderness, her father's words from years ago, "Life has a way of putting the right people in your path when you need them most," echoed in her mind. She hoped desperately that Finn Irwin was one of those people. The second day of riding brought them deeper into the mountains. The terrain grew rougher, the trails narrower, and several times they had to dismount and lead the horses through difficult passages. But Finn navigated it all with sure knowledge, never hesitating at forks in the trail or pausing to get his bearings. "How long have you been living out here?" Willa asked during one of their rest stops. 8 years, more or less. Came west after the war. Could not settle back into regular life after all that. She heard the weight in those simple words, the things he was not saying. Many men had come west for exactly that reason, trying to outrun memories of battles and blood. She did not press for details. "You ever miss it?" "Regular life, I mean." Finn considered this, running a hand through his long hair. "Sometimes. Miss having someone to talk to mainly, but I do not miss the crowds, the noise, the way people are always watching and judging. Out here a man can just be. No expectations, no eyes on you all the time." "Or a woman," Willa added softly. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "Or a woman," he agreed. They reached the cabin in late afternoon. It sat in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, with a creek running nearby and a view of the mountains that took Willa's breath away. The structure itself was solid and well made, built from hewn logs with a stone chimney and real glass in the windows, a rarity this far from civilization. "You built this yourself?" she asked as they dismounted. "Took most of my first winter here. Gave me something to do besides freeze." Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. The main room held a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies and equipment, and hooks on the walls for hanging furs to cure. 2 doors led off from the main room to the bedrooms Finn had mentioned. "That one is yours," he said, gesturing to the door on the left. "I cleared it out before I left for Fort Benton, so it is ready." Willa opened the door to find a small but adequate room with a bed frame, a chest for storage, and another window looking out toward the mountains. It was more space than she had expected, more privacy than she had dared hope for. "This is good," she said, turning back to find Finn watching her with an unreadable expression. "Really good, thank you. We will get you set up proper tomorrow. For tonight, let us just get settled and make some food. We have a lot of work ahead of us." Over the following weeks, Willa fell into a rhythm of life that was both utterly foreign and strangely perfect. Each morning, she and Finn would head out in different directions to check their trap lines, meeting back at the cabin in late afternoon to process whatever they had caught. The work was hard and bloody, requiring strength and skill in equal measure, but it was also satisfying in a way Willa had never experienced. Finn was a good partner, teaching her the land while respecting that she already knew the craft of trapping. He showed her where the beaver dams were most active, how to read the signs of mink and otter along the creek banks, which areas to avoid due to grizzly activity. She, in turn, showed him some of her father's techniques for curing pelts that produced superior quality furs. They worked well together, falling into an easy partnership that felt natural despite how unusual their arrangement was. Finn was a man of few words, but the words he did speak were always worth hearing. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard at first, delivering deadpan observations that made her laugh unexpectedly. And he was patient, never condescending when she asked questions or made mistakes learning the new territory. But more than any of that, Willa found herself noticing things about him that had nothing to do with business. The way he moved through the wilderness with unconscious grace despite his size. How his hands, so large and rough, could be incredibly gentle when treating an injured animal they found near one of the traps. The rare smile that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. The sound of his voice in the evenings when they sat by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. She tried not to think about these observations too much, tried to keep things professional between them. But it was difficult when she caught herself watching him split firewood, his shirt stretching across his muscular back with each powerful swing of the axe. When his hand would brush hers accidentally as they worked side by side skinning and curing pelts. When she would wake in the night and hear him moving quietly in the main room, stoking the fire, and feel comforted by his presence just beyond her door. One evening, about a month into their partnership, a storm rolled in from the west with shocking speed. They barely made it back to the cabin before the sky opened up, releasing sheets of rain driven by howling wind. Thunder cracked overhead, so loud it shook the walls, and lightning illuminated the clearing in brilliant flashes. Willa stood at the window, watching the storm with a mixture of awe and unease. She had seen plenty of weather in her life, but there was something primal about storms in the mountains, a reminder of how small and fragile human beings really were. Worried. Finn asked from where he was building up the fire. A little. I hope the trap lines hold. They will. I anchor them solid, but we will have a lot of water to deal with tomorrow, probably some flooding in the lower valleys. A particularly loud crack of thunder made her jump, and Finn chuckled softly. Storm shy, not usually. This one just feels big. It is, but we are safe here. Cabin has weathered worse. She believed him, but she did not move from the window. There was something mesmerizing about the raw power of the storm, the way it turned the familiar clearing into something alien and wild. Finn joined her at the window, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. My first winter here, we got snowed in for almost 3 weeks straight. Could not even open the door, the drifts were so high. Had to dig a tunnel just to get to the woodpile. That sounds terrifying. It was at first, then it got peaceful. All that white silence, knowing nobody could reach you even if they wanted to. Just me and the mountains and all the time in the world to think. What did you think about? He was quiet for a moment, his shoulder brushing hers. Lots of things. The war, the friends I lost. What I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Whether I wanted to spend it alone or not. The personal admission hung in the air between them. Willa's heart was beating faster now, and it had nothing to do with the storm. Did you decide, she asked softly, about being alone? Finn turned to look at her, and in the flickering firelight, his blue eyes were intense. I thought I had. Thought I was fine with solitude, that it was better than the alternative. Then you walked into that trading post, and I started thinking maybe I had decided wrong. Willa's breath caught. Finn, I know this is not proper, he continued, his voice low and rough. I know we are supposed to be just business partners, and I have been trying real hard to keep it that way. But I would be lying if I said that was all I see when I look at you. Her mind was racing, her body hyper-aware of how close he was standing. What do you see? Someone strong. Someone smart and brave and capable. Someone I want to keep talking to long after this trapping season ends. Someone I want to wake up to every morning and fall asleep beside every night. It was the longest speech she had ever heard him make, and the emotion in his voice made her chest tight. I want that too, she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. I have been trying not to, trying to keep things proper between us, but I think about you all the time. Think about what it would be like if we were more than partners. Finn reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his large, calloused hand. His touch was warm and gentle, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with surprising tenderness. Can I kiss you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering, Willa rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss started soft and tentative, both of them testing new territory. But then Finn's other hand came up to frame her face, and he deepened the kiss with a hunger that made her knees weak. She gripped his shirt, steadying herself against the overwhelming sensation of his mouth on hers, his solid presence surrounding her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Finn rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Only weeks. I have wanted it since Fort Benton." He laughed, a real laugh that she felt rumble through his chest. "That long, and here I thought I was being too forward. Finn Irwin, you are the most careful, proper mountain man I have ever met." "Only mountain man you have ever met," he corrected, but he was smiling. "Still counts." They kissed again and again, until the storm outside faded into background noise, and all Willa was aware of was the taste of his mouth, the warmth of his body, the way his hands moved so carefully in her hair, as though she was something precious and fragile. "We should probably talk about this," Finn said eventually, though he made no move to release her, probably. Willa pressed another kiss to the corner of his mouth. "What is there to talk about? Everything. What this means, what we want, how we move forward." She pulled back enough to look at him properly. His hair was mussed from her fingers, his lips slightly swollen from kissing, and he looked more alive and open than she had ever seen him. "I want to be with you," she said simply. "Not just as a business partner, though I want that too, but as more. As everything, if that is what you want." "It is exactly what I want." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "But I need you to know I am serious about this, about you. I do not do things halfway, Willa. If we start this, I am all in. I want a future with you, a real one." The intensity of his declaration should have scared her, but instead it filled her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "Good," she said firmly, "because I do not do things halfway either." Finn grinned, that rare boyish expression that transformed his face, and pulled her close again. They stood wrapped around each other, swaying slightly in the firelight, as the storm raged outside and something new and beautiful bloomed between them. The next few months were the happiest of Willa's life. She and Finn continued their trapping partnership, but now their relationship had deepened into something rich and profound. They fell into a domestic routine that felt as natural as breathing. Mornings started with coffee and quiet conversation at the table, planning their day's work. Evenings ended with dinner and stories by the fire, learning each other's histories and dreams. The physical aspect of their relationship developed slowly, both of them savoring each step. Finn never pushed, always making sure Willa was comfortable and willing. His hands, so capable and strong in every other context, touched her with a reverence that made her feel cherished in ways she had never experienced. They talked about everything. Finn opened up about his past, about growing up on a farm in Ohio, about the war and the things he had seen that still haunted him sometimes, about the restlessness that had driven him west and the peace he had finally found in the mountains. Willa shared her own stories about her childhood, about the adventures and misadventures she had had with her father, about the grief that still caught her off guard sometimes when she least expected it. "He would have liked you," she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "My father. He always said the measure of a man was how he treated people who could not do anything for him." Finn's arm tightened around her shoulders. "He did right by you, teaching you to stand on your own. Not every father would give his daughter that gift. He did not have much choice. It was just the two of us. He could either teach me or leave me helpless, and he was not the kind to leave anyone helpless. Smart man." The trapping was going well, better than either of them had expected. Working together, they were able to cover more territory and maintain larger trap lines than would have been possible alone. Their take of beaver, mink, and otter pelts steadily grew. all of them carefully cured using the techniques Willa had learned from her father, and the ones Finn had developed through years of experience. As autumn began to turn toward winter, they made plans for a trip back to Fort Benton to sell their furs. Neither of them was looking forward to dealing with traders again, but it was necessary. "We will skip Potts entirely," Finn said as they packed the pelts for transport. "There is another trader, man named James Wright, who deals mainly with the big buyers back east. He has always been fair with me." "And if he is not?" Willa asked, running her hand over a particularly fine beaver pelt. "Then we will take our business elsewhere. We have options now, and we know what our furs are worth. Nobody is going to cheat us." The journey back to Fort Benton took 3 days, their pace slower due to the heavy load of furs they were transporting. They made camp each night under the vast Montana sky, and Willa found herself thinking about how different this trip was from her first arrival in Fort Benton months ago, desperate and alone and terrified. Now she had Finn beside her, solid and dependable and hers. She had a home, a livelihood, a future that stretched out bright with possibility. Fort Benton looked exactly the same when they arrived, but Willa felt different riding down its main street. She sat straighter in her saddle, met people's stares with confidence rather than fear. Let them judge. She had survived and thrived in the wilderness, had built something real with her own hands and skills. Their opinions could not touch her. James Wright's trading post was larger and better organized than Potts's establishment, with furs hanging on display and the smell of good tobacco rather than stale sweat. Wright himself was a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and an honest handshake. "Finn, good to see you," he said warmly. "And who is this?" "My business partner, Willa Garrett. Willa James Wright, best trader in the territory." "Partner?" Wright's eyebrows rose, but his tone was respectful. "Well then, Miss Garrett, Finn partnering with someone is high praise. He usually works alone." "Not anymore," Finn said simply, and the pride in his voice made Willa's heart swell. They spread their furs out on Wright's large counter, and Willa watched the trader's face carefully as he examined their work. His expression grew more impressed with each pelt he inspected. "This is exceptional quality," Wright said finally. "Some of the best beaver I have seen in years, and the mink are perfect. You two do all this work together." "We did," Willa confirmed. "Equal partnership, equal work. Shows. The consistency of the curing is remarkable. Usually when you have two trappers working together, you can see differences in technique. But these are all uniform, professional grade." He pulled out a ledger and began calculating. "I can give you $400 for the lot, plus I will throw in store credit for supplies. That is top price, not negotiable because I am already being generous." Finn looked at Willa, deferring to her judgment. She thought about it, comparing Wright's offer to what she knew of fur prices, then nodded. "That is fair. We accept." The transaction was completed quickly and professionally. Wright counted out the money, then added vouchers for supplies that they could use at any of the general stores that partnered with his trading post. As they packed up, preparing to leave, he called after them. "You two planning to trap again next season?" "We are," Finn said. "Come see me first. I have buyers in New York who would pay premium prices for quality like this. We could arrange a contract, guaranteed purchase at set rates, give you more security." It was a generous offer, the kind that could turn trapping from a risky gamble into reliable income. Finn squeezed Willa's hand gently, waiting for her input. "We will think about it and let you know," Willa said. "Thank you for the fair dealing." Outside the trading post, Finn pulled her into an alley between buildings and kissed her soundly. "You were amazing in there," he said against her lips. "I just stated facts. You were the one who taught me most of what I know about this territory. We make a good team." He pulled back, his expression growing serious. $200 each, just like we agreed. You want to count it now or wait until we are out of town? I trust you, Finn. Something fierce and tender flashed in his eyes. I know, but we are partners and partners keep things square, so we count it proper. They divided the money in the alley, $200 apiece, more than Willa had ever earned in a season. The store credit they decided to share, using it to stock up on supplies for the coming winter. Flour, sugar, coffee, salt, dried beans, ammunition. A new axe to replace Finn's aging one, fabric for Willa to make new clothes, and dozens of other necessities. As they worked their way through the general store, filling their saddlebags and packs, Willa became aware of whispers following them. She caught fragments of conversations, speculation about the nature of her relationship with Finn, judgments about propriety and scandal. Part of her wanted to explain, to defend herself, to make these strangers understand. But then Finn's hand found hers, his fingers interlacing with hers in plain view of everyone, and she realized she did not care what they thought. "Let them talk," he murmured, echoing her thoughts. "Does not matter." "No," she agreed, "it does not." They were loading the last of their supplies when Samuel Potts appeared, his face twisted with spite. "Well, well, the mountain man and his pet, how is your little arrangement working out?" Finn went very still, his body tensing in a way that spoke of danger. But before he could respond, Willa stepped forward. "Better than your business, I imagine," she said coolly. "Word travels, Potts. People know you tried to cheat me, and they know Finn stopped you." "How many customers have you lost since then?" Potts's face went red. "You watch your mouth, girl. You are nothing but a whore pretending to be a trapper." Finn moved then, fast as a striking snake despite his size. One moment he was beside the horses, the next he had Potts by the shirt front, lifting him off his feet. The violence of it shocked Willa, though Finn's voice when he spoke was deadly calm. "You will apologize to Miss Garrett right now, or I will make you regret every word you just said." "This is assault," Potts wheezed. "I will have the law on you." "The law is 200 miles away, and you just slandered a lady in front of a dozen witnesses. Now apologize, or I start breaking things." Several men had gathered, watching the confrontation. One of them, a grizzled older trapper Willa recognized from Wright's trading post, spoke up. "He is right, Potts. You were out of line. Miss Garrett has not done anything wrong except refuse to let you cheat her." Others murmured agreement. Potts looked around at the hostile faces and seemed to realize he had no support. "Fine," he spat. "I apologize. Now put me down." Finn held him a moment longer, making sure the lesson sank in, then released him. Potts stumbled back, straightening his shirt with as much dignity as he could muster. "You have not heard the last of this," he said, but his threat rang hollow. "I think we have," Finn replied, "because you are smart enough to know when you are beaten. Now get out of our sight." Potts retreated, shooting them venomous looks but clearly unwilling to push his luck further. The crowd dispersed, and Finn turned to Willa, his expression concerned. "Are you all right?" She was trembling slightly, more from anger than fear. "I am fine. Thank you for defending me, always." He cupped her face gently, the tenderness of the gesture in stark contrast to the violence of moments before. "Nobody talks about you like that. Nobody." They left Fort Benton within the hour, both eager to return to the peace of the mountains. As the town disappeared behind them, Willa felt the tension drain from her shoulders. The incident with Potts had been unpleasant, but it had also revealed something important. Finn would protect her, stand up for her, fight for her if necessary, and she would do the same for him. They were partners in every sense of the word, bound together by more than just business. The ride back to the cabin felt like coming home. As they crested the final ridge and saw the clearing below, smoke rising from the chimney they had left banked, Willa felt a rush of emotion so strong it brought tears to her eyes. "This is home now," she said softly. "Really home." Finn reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. "It is, for as long as you want it to be. How about forever?" His smile was brighter than the Montana sun. "Forever works for me." Winter came early that year, sweeping down from Canada with icy winds and heavy snow. By late November, the trap lines were frozen solid, and the land had transformed into a white wilderness that was both beautiful and dangerous. Finn and Willa settled into their cabin for the long, cold months ahead. Their supplies laid in. Their work shifted from active trapping to preparing equipment for spring and maintaining what they already had. The forced proximity of winter, snowed in together for weeks at a time, could have been difficult. Instead, it was magical. They developed rhythms and rituals that filled the short days and long nights. Mornings were for practical work, mending traps, checking supplies, keeping the fire going and the animals fed. Afternoons were for reading aloud from the small collection of books Finn had accumulated, or teaching each other skills and songs from their pasts. Evenings were theirs alone, spent tangled together on the large bed in Finn's room that had quietly become their shared space. Willa had moved her things in without discussion, neither of them seeing any reason to maintain separate rooms when they spent every night wrapped in each other's arms anyway. One particularly fierce night, when the wind howled outside and snow piled against the walls, Finn pulled Willa close and said quietly, "Marry me." She went still, her heart pounding. "What, marry me?" he repeated, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at her. "I know we have not been together that long, but I have never been more sure of anything. I want you as my wife, legally and officially. I want everyone to know you are mine and I am yours." Tears pricked at Willa's eyes. "There is no one to marry us out here. No preacher, no law." "Then we will go to Fort Benton in spring, or Helena, or wherever we need to go. But I want to do this right, Willa. I want to marry you proper, with papers and vows and everything legal." She kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, I will marry you." Finn's answering kiss was fierce and tender all at once, and they made love slowly, reverently, sealing their promise to each other in the most fundamental way possible. The rest of the winter passed in a haze of happiness. They made plans for their wedding, for their future, for the life they would build together. Finn carved her a ring from a piece of elk antler, smooth and beautiful and unique. She fashioned him one from braided horsehair, 3 strands twisted together to represent strength and unity. "Not much for wedding rings," he said, admiring his. "They are perfect," Willa insisted. "We can get gold ones later if you want, but these are ours, made by us for us." Spring arrived slowly, the snow melting in patches to reveal the brown earth beneath. As soon as the trails were passable, Finn and Willa began preparing for their journey. They would go to Helena this time, Finn decided, where there was a proper church and a minister who knew him. The trip took over a week through mud-choked trails and swollen rivers, but they finally arrived in Helena in early May. The town was larger than Fort Benton, more established, with real streets and substantial buildings. Finn led them directly to a white church on the main street, where a minister named Reverend Michaels greeted them warmly. "Finn Irwin, as I live and breathe," the Reverend said, shaking Finn's hand vigorously. "I have not seen you in, 5 years, about that. This is Willa Garrett. My fiancée. We want to get married proper and legal." Reverend Michaels looked between them, his expression kind. "Well then, let us make that happen. I will need to post the banns for 3 weeks, as is proper, but then we can have a lovely ceremony." 3 weeks was longer than either of them wanted to wait, but it gave them time to take care of other business. They visited the land office and filed a claim on the property where Finn's cabin sat, making it legally theirs. They ordered a proper gold wedding band for Willa from a jeweler, though Finn insisted on keeping his horsehair ring. They purchased fabric for a wedding dress, which Willa sewed herself in the boarding house room they rented. The bands were posted, and no one objected to the marriage. On a sunny morning in late May, with wildflowers blooming across the Montana hills, Willa Garrett and Finn Irwin were married in the Helena church. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, with Reverend Michaels speaking about love and partnership and building a life together. When Finn kissed his bride, there were tears in his eyes, and Willa felt so full of joy she thought she might burst. They spent their wedding night in the nicest hotel in Helena, a luxury neither of them was accustomed to but both agreed they deserved for the occasion. The next morning, they began the journey back to their cabin, back to their life in the mountains, now as husband and wife. The years that followed were full and rich. They continued trapping, building a reputation for quality furs that commanded premium prices. The contract with James Wright proved profitable, providing them with steady income and allowing them to expand their operation. They built a larger cabin, adding rooms for the future they both hoped for. That future arrived in the spring of 1876, when Willa discovered she was pregnant. The realization filled her with equal parts excitement and terror. She was 24 now, Finn 32, and they had talked about children often. But the reality of bringing a new life into the wilderness was daunting. Finn was overjoyed and immediately overprotective, trying to take over all the heavy work and fretting every time Willa so much as lifted a trap. She tolerated it with good humor, understanding that his concern came from love, but she also insisted on maintaining her share of their work as long as she was able. "I am pregnant, not broken," she reminded him when he tried to stop her from checking a nearby trap line. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Not my wife," he said stubbornly. "Not carrying my child. Finn Irwin, if you do not let me keep working, I am going to go mad from boredom. I promise I will be careful. I promise I will stop when I need to, but you have to let me keep being myself." He relented, though his eyes followed her constantly whenever they were working, watching for any sign of distress. Willa found it both annoying and endearing, this fierce protectiveness that was so essentially Finn. As her pregnancy advanced, they made preparations. Finn rode to Helena and brought back a midwife named Martha, an older woman with decades of experience, to stay with them through the birth and the weeks after. Martha took one look at the cabin, at Willa's setup, at the supplies they had gathered, and nodded approvingly. "You two are more prepared than most folks I see in town," she said. "Baby will be lucky to have you." The baby arrived in early December, during a brief warm spell between winter storms. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Finn, pacing outside the bedroom door, thought he might lose his mind from helplessness. But finally, Martha emerged with a small bundle and a tired smile. "You have a son," she said. "Healthy lungs, good color, perfect in every way." Finn rushed into the bedroom to find Willa exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny red-faced infant against her chest. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was wailing lustily, protesting his sudden arrival in the cold world. "Meet your son," Willa said softly, and Finn felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. They named him Daniel, after Willa's father, and from the moment he entered the world, he owned his parents completely. Finn, who had fought in a war and survived alone in the wilderness for years, was reduced to a puddle of sentiment by his son's tiny fingers and toothless smiles. Willa watched her huge, rough mountain man husband cradle their baby with infinite gentleness and fell in love with him all over again. Parenthood changed them, as it changed everyone, but it did not diminish their partnership. They adapted their work routines, taking turns watching Daniel while the other checked trap lines. Martha stayed for a month, teaching Willa everything she knew about infant care, then returned to Helena with a promise to visit in the spring. Daniel grew strong and healthy, thriving in the mountain air. By his first birthday, he was walking and getting into everything, fearless and curious about the world around him. Finn built him a small rocking horse and spent hours playing with him, his deep voice telling stories and singing half-remembered songs from his own childhood. When Daniel was 2, Willa became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy was easier. Their daughter arrived in the summer of 1879, born during a thunderstorm that rattled the cabin walls. She came into the world quickly, barely giving Martha time to arrive, and from her first breath she was different from her brother. Quieter, more observant, with Willa's brown eyes and Finn's determined jaw, they named her Rose, and she completed their family in ways none of them had anticipated. Daniel was protective of his baby sister, bringing her flowers and interesting rocks, telling her seriously about all the things he would teach her when she was bigger. Finn and Willa watched their children grow with wonder and gratitude, knowing how lucky they were to have this life they had built together. The years rolled on, marked by seasons and harvests, and the slow, steady growth of their children. Daniel learned to trap alongside his father, showing the same natural aptitude Willa had once demonstrated. Rose preferred the work of curing and preparing pelts, developing her mother's eye for quality and detail. The cabin expanded again, rooms added as the children grew and needed their own spaces. The land around it was gradually cleared and cultivated, Willa starting a garden that provided vegetables through the summer and fall. They acquired chickens, a milk cow, a barn for the growing number of horses and mules they needed for their work. What had started as a simple trapper's cabin became a real homestead, a place where a family not only survived but thrived. Other trappers and settlers began to recognize Finn and Willa Irwin as established residents of the territory, respected for their work and the life they had built. Through it all, through the hard years and the good ones, the long winters and brief summers, the triumphs and the occasional setbacks, Finn and Willa's love remained the foundation of everything. They still made time for each other, stealing moments alone when the children were asleep, taking walks through the mountains they both loved, sitting on the porch in the evenings talking about dreams and plans and memories. "You ever regret it?" Willa asked one night, years into their marriage. Taking a chance on a desperate woman in a trading post, Finn pulled her closer, his arm solid around her shoulders. "Best decision I ever made. You changed my life, Willa. Gave me a purpose beyond just surviving. Gave me a family, a real home, something worth protecting and building." "You did the same for me. I was so lost that day, so scared. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," he corrected. "Partners, remember?" She smiled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Partners, always." The Montana Territory became the state of Montana in 1889, and Finn and Willa attended the celebration in Helena with their children, now teenagers with lives and dreams of their own. Daniel had grown into a young man who looked remarkably like his father, tall and broad-shouldered and quiet, while Rose had inherited her mother's quick mind and her father's steady determination. As they watched the ceremony marking statehood, Willa thought about everything that had changed since that desperate day in Fort Benton 15 years ago. She had been so alone then, so uncertain of her future. Now she was surrounded by family, anchored by love, secure in the life they had built through hard work and partnership and trust. "What are you thinking about?" Finn murmured, his hand finding hers. "How far we have come. How much has changed." "Some things never change," he said, lifting her hand to kiss it. "Still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Still the best partner I could ask for. Still the love of my life." She turned to kiss him properly, not caring who saw, still as affected by his words now as she had been the first time he told her he loved her. Their children groaned good-naturedly at the display of affection, but both were smiling. As the celebration continued around them, fireworks lighting up the Montana sky, Willa leaned against her husband and let herself feel the full weight of her happiness. It had not been an easy journey, this life they had built. There had been struggles and setbacks, moments of fear and grief and doubt. But there had also been joy, so much joy and love that had only grown deeper with time. The trading post confrontation seemed like a lifetime ago now. That moment when Finn had stepped in to stop an injustice and changed both their lives forever. Sometimes Willa wondered what would have happened if he had not been there that day, if he had stayed in the mountains or arrived an hour later. Would she have accepted Potts's terrible offer? Would she have survived? But she did not wonder for long, because that was not what happened. Finn had been there, had seen her worth when she was at her lowest, had offered her partnership and respect and eventually love. He had given her everything, and she had given him the same in return. Their story was not extraordinary by some standards. No great battles fought, no legendary fortunes made, no names that would go down in history books. But to them, to their children, to the small community of trappers and settlers who knew them, it was a story worth telling. A story about fairness and partnership, and the kind of love that was built on mutual respect and shared dreams. As they rode back to their homestead after the celebration, the four of them together on horses they had raised from foals, Willa looked at the faces of her family and felt complete. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it, this sense of belonging, of being exactly where she was meant to be with exactly the right people. Years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to their story. Daniel fell in love with a settler's daughter and married her in a ceremony at the homestead, bringing a new daughter into the family. Rose chose a different path, opening a trading business in Helena that quickly became known for fair dealing and quality goods. Building on the lessons both her parents had taught her, Finn and Willa became grandparents, watching their legacy continue in the next generation. They aged together, silver threading through their hair, lines deepening around their eyes, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and long winters. But their love remained young, renewed each day in small gestures and shared glances and the comfortable silence of two people who knew each other completely. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Finn took Willa back to Fort Benton. The town had grown significantly, new buildings replacing old ones, more people crowding the streets. Potts's trading post was long gone, the building now housing a respectable general store. James Wright had retired, his business taken over by his sons who maintained his reputation for fair dealing. They stood in the spot where they had first met, outside what used to be Potts's establishment, and remembered. "I was so scared that day," Willa admitted. "So alone and desperate." "You were also brave," Finn said. "You stood up to a cheater even though you had nothing. That took courage." "I got lucky. You walked in at exactly the right moment." He shook his head. "Luck had nothing to do with it. You deserved someone to stand up for you, and I was fortunate enough to be in the right place to do it. But even if I had not been there, you would have found another way. You are one of the strongest people I have ever known." She leaned into him, still fitting perfectly against his side after all these years. "We make a good team, the best team." They left Fort Benton hand in hand, riding back toward the mountains that had become their true home. The journey was familiar now. Every rock and tree and turn in the trail memorized through countless trips over the decades. But it never got old, this feeling of heading home, of moving toward the place and the life they had built together. As they crested the final ridge and saw their homestead spread below, smoke rising from multiple chimneys now, Daniel's cabin visible in the clearing nearby, horses grazing in expanded pastures, Willa felt the same rush of belonging she had felt that first time so many years ago. "There it is," Finn said softly. "Home." "Home," Willa echoed, and the word contained everything. Love, family, partnership, belonging, all the things that made life worth living. They rode down together into the valley, into the life they had made through trust and hard work and a chance encounter in a trading post that had changed everything. It was not a fairy tale ending, because real life was better than fairy tales. Real life had struggle and imperfection, and the daily work of maintaining what you had built. But it also had moments of perfect happiness, of profound gratitude, of love that deepened rather than faded with time. That night, lying in bed with Finn's arms around her, and the sound of their family's voices drifting from Daniel's cabin nearby, Willa thought about the story of their lives. If someone asked her to sum it up, to explain how a desperate woman and a solitary mountain man had built this full, rich life together, she would say it started with fairness, with one person seeing another's worth and choosing to act on it, with partnership that respected each person's contribution and dignity. Everything else, the love and the family and the home, had grown from those foundations. Finn had negotiated a fair price for her furs when someone else tried to cheat her. He had offered to split the profits equally when he could have kept everything for himself. Those actions, simple on the surface, had shown her who he was at his core. A man who believed in fairness, in respecting others, in building something real rather than taking advantage. And she had proven herself worthy of that trust, working as hard as he did, contributing equally to their partnership, building alongside him rather than relying on him to build for her. They had created something together that neither could have achieved alone, something that had outlasted the temporary challenges and grown stronger with each passing year. As sleep began to claim her, warm and safe and loved, Willa's last thought was one of profound gratitude. For the twist of fate that had put Finn in that trading post on that particular day. For his courage in standing up for a stranger. For the love they had found in each other. For the life they had built and the legacy they would leave behind. In the morning, there would be work to do. Trap lines to check, pelts to cure, grandchildren to teach, a homestead to maintain. The work never truly ended, but that was all right because they did it together, partners in every sense of the word, just as they had been from that very first day. The love story of Finn and Willa Irwin was not written in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, though there had been plenty of both over the years. It was written in daily choices, in fairness and respect and trust that was earned and maintained through actions rather than words. It was written in the life they had built, stone by stone, season by season, until they had created something enduring and beautiful. And if you traveled through Montana territory in those days, if you stopped at their homestead and were welcomed in for a meal and conversation, you would see it in the way they moved around each other, anticipating needs without speaking, working together with the ease of long practice. You would hear it in their voices when they spoke to each other, in the respect and affection that colored every word. You would feel it in the warmth of their home, in the obvious love that had been poured into every detail. People who knew them told their story often, especially to young couples just starting out. They told it as an example of how things should be, how partnership and fairness and mutual respect could create something that lasted, something worth having. The details would shift slightly with each telling, but the core remained the same. A trader tried to cheat her. A mountain man negotiated a fair price and split the profits with her. And from that foundation of respect and fairness, love grew. It was a simple story, really. But the best love stories often were. Not grand or complicated, just two people choosing each other day after day, building a life together through trust and hard work and unwavering commitment. That was what Finn and Willa had, and that was what made their story worth telling, worth remembering, worth aspiring to. As the years continued to roll by and they grew older together, never once did they regret the choices that had brought them to each other. The trading post confrontation that could have been just another moment of injustice, instead, became the beginning of everything good in both their lives. And when they were old and gray, surrounded by children and grandchildren and the fruits of their shared labor, they would sometimes look at each other and remember that first moment, that first choice to treat each other fairly, to see each other's worth, to build something together. "Best decision I ever made," Finn would say, as he had said countless times over the years. "Best decision we ever made," Willa would correct, as she always did. And they would smile at each other, these two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that exceeded either of their dreams. Partners in business, partners in life, partners in love, from that first day in Fort Benton to their last days together in the mountains they had made their home. Their love story, born in a moment of fairness and grown through years of partnership, became part of the Montana landscape, as enduring as the mountains themselves, as constant as the rivers, as true as anything could be. And that, in the end, was all anyone could hope for. A love built on solid foundations, tested by time, and emerging stronger with each passing year. The end of their story was not sad, because they had lived fully and loved completely and left behind something beautiful. When the time came for each of them to pass, they went peacefully, surrounded by the family they had created and the legacy they had built. And those who remained told their story to new generations, keeping alive the memory of the trader who tried to cheat her, the mountain man who negotiated a fair price and split the profits with her, and the extraordinary love that had grown from that simple act of fairness and respect. In the annals of Montana history, among the stories of gold rushes and cattle drives and legendary outlaws, there was also this story. Quieter perhaps, less dramatic, but no less important. The story of Finn and Willa Irwin, who proved that the best foundations were built on fairness, the best partnerships on respect, and the best loves on trust that was earned and maintained every single day. And so their story ended where all good stories should, with love triumphant, family thriving, and two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed to become more than they ever could have been alone. It was a happy ending, fully closed, with no loose threads or unanswered questions. Just a life well lived, a love well earned, and a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. Their homestead still stands in Montana, maintained now by their descendants, a testament to what two people can build when they approach each other with fairness and respect. Visitors sometimes stop there, drawn by the story they have heard, wanting to see the place where this legendary partnership began its work. And the current residents, great-great-grandchildren of Finn and Willa, still tell the story of how it all started, with a woman being cheated, a man standing up for what was right, and a partnership that changed both their lives forever. That was the true magic of their story. Not that they lived happily ever after, though they did, but that their happiness was earned through choice and work and unwavering commitment to treating each other fairly. That their love was built on a foundation solid enough to last not just their lifetimes but beyond, inspiring others to build their own lives on similar principles. Finn and Willa Irwin lived, loved, worked, and thrived in the Montana Territory that became Montana State. They raised children who raised children who raised children, each generation carrying forward the lessons of fairness and partnership and respect that had created the family in the first place. And when people speak of the old days, of the Wild West and the people who carved lives from wilderness, they speak of the Irwins with respect and admiration, not because they were rich, though they did well enough, not because they were famous, though their reputation spread far, but because they showed what was possible when two people committed to treating each other as true equals, partners in every sense of the word, building together rather than one supporting the other. That was their legacy, and it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.